Good morning, afternoon, evening, night if you're having a late night podcast catch up. It's good to be with you in this strange form. Now it could be just moments since you were last with us, but we've not recorded in a little while, so What have we been up to?
Oh gosh, it's always a slightly open-ended question, isn't it? Yeah. I've been on holiday.
Lovely.
I've been in Northumberland, that was nice. Always a pleasure, half term. That was good. What else have I been up to? Just lots of things. Obviously quite a lot of stuff around the hub. That's going forward, hub project, so that's where we're up to with that. Moving forward with that. The letter that came out recently will have updated folk on that, so that's one of the things that's been taking a bit of time. Jim Wigglesworth arrives soon, so we'll be doing some stuff with that, and then the usual round of stuff really. So quite a lot of different things, quite a lot of sort of moving stuff forwards, mostly in the background.
Okay.
So that's sort of like where you can't say, "Oh, look, I did this. Look, everybody, this is done."
So the older this podcast is when you listen, the more you can ask James about what's happened.
Well, if you're listening next year, or even if you're listening in a few months, most of that stuff will be further on, so that'll be good.
Thanks.
Yes, similar for me really, Adam. I've been doing some sort of backgroundy stuff, as James put it, so I'm keeping a weather eye on the Passion for Life website, because they're allegedly launching some initial stuff for the Find Life in Jesus mission that happens next Easter, but the new website with some additional new material is allegedly going live in June, which is what it is as we record this.
Don't tell people that. It's a secret.
Corks. Yeah. So I'm looking at that. There's nothing landed yet, but keep an eye on that. I've been thinking about what we might do for the mission, all the usual stuff, and including the magazines, which are still going along nicely. And then similarly, we had a sort of a short city break over the half term. We had a very nostalgic trip, for me at least, up to York when I was at university, because I had this scary realisation. It was 30 years ago this summer since I graduated, so I thought let's go up, because York's a brilliant city to look round. So we took in a museum, walked the walls a bit, and then we spent the morning wandering around the campus, and then we had lunch with my sister, who lives just sort of next door to the village where the university is now.
Brilliant.
So nice to catch up with them as well. So yeah.
Cool.
And the next set of Rollins are quite young to be prodding about university cities just yet. Did you do much Harry Potter location spotting, or has that gone out of fashion?
Harry Potter, I didn't know he was in York, to be honest.
Oh, he's been all over.
I'm afraid the whole...
Probably the Shambles, isn't it? Was it the Shambles? Where were those streets are called?
I think of Harry Potter, I think of King's Cross Station as much as anything.
I think it did do some recording in York. This has gone off beam.
I think the diagonality is the one shop stuff.
It's probably the Shambles.
Right. I'm afraid the whole Harry Potter thing sort of passed me by.
Yeah.
Because I was the wrong age and didn't have,
No, you didn't have a kids that
offspring at that time to watch it. So yeah.
I missed it. Never mind.
I'm going to say the most controversial thing I've ever said on this podcast. You didn't miss that much.
I
can hear the letters.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll begin by Al.
I could just sort of up our hit count just by saying J.K. Rowling. That should just kind of generate a bit of noise one way or the other, shouldn't it?
Yeah, you've done it now.
Reminder, you can send your questions in.
Yes, moving on.
Yeah. Constructive questions.
Yeah.
What have you been doing other than sneezing?
Not a whole lot. I've been really enjoying my new cycle to work and back.
Yeah. Have you thought about investing in a mask? I mean that in all seriousness.
What, like a Halloween one?
No, like an anti-pollen mask.
Send in suggestions. The TOTS team at St Paul's this morning were talking to me about vaccinations, which might be quite good.
Okay.
I'm going to wave my handy loo roll.
Yeah. High quality props. We couldn't even afford a box of nice tissues.
No, we couldn't. Never mind.
We're husbanding the church budget viewers.
Yeah. We are.
Yeah, somewhere Nick is, please.
Yes.
But my cycle to work is much better than it was. I used to have a right faff getting a bike out of a flat and then a very short little trundle, and now I've got a very easy journey off the drive and a trickier couple of hills since then.
Oh, the hills of Belter.
Yeah, you're mostly downhill on the way and uphill on the way back, aren't you, I'm afraid?
Yeah. Which is the right way around.
You reckon?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to get here in a horrible state.
Okay.
If possible.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, that's good fun.
Okay. Do you think we've meandered around
I
enough?
think we probably have. Yeah.
Just say something else about J.K. Rowling, then we'll move on.
Yeah, no, that's it. I'm not saying anything else about Harry Potter.
Well, we're going to find out a little bit about Mr. Rollin's
Yeah, I was
path
going to say,
into
we're not going to
this
find anything
in the
about
rest
Harry
of this
Potter.
episode.
Yeah.
But it turns out it's all to do with J.K. Rowling. So we'll hear about that in a
Used
minute.
to be.
So here we are, we've done the obligatory moving around of seats and we get to our main item for today's podcast. If you're wondering about that title, how did we get here? How did we get here to? Return of getting there. We're going to spend some time thinking a little bit about paths into ministry, thinking about how it is that we as members of the ministry team have got to be in the place we're in today. If you remember from a few episodes back, so probably a couple of months ago, by the time you're listening to this, or about 2 hours ago, depending how you listen to these podcasts, we talked about yours, didn't we, James? A few episodes ago. But we're now going to speak to somebody else called James, obviously. So we're going to talk to James Rollin, who is in the hot seat, to talk about paths into ministry. So I suppose the first question, nice and open-ended, is how did you get here?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, James. If I just sort of start by way of introduction, I think as majority of people know, I worked for a number of years, I think 18 if not 19 years in the rail industry, doing various communications, sort of public relations, marketing type stuff. And if you'd asked me sort of 10 years ago would I end up here, when I've got here, I'd have been sort of somewhat surprised. But really, in looking back in hindsight, I think it was a case of God using various circumstances. If you like, work-wise, I was over here, and the Lord clearly wanted me over there. And without going into boring the listeners with loads of detail, but the last job I was in the rail industry, I've been there about sort of a year, 18 months, and then sort of things went very pear-shaped. And cut a long story short, I left that job. For various reasons, and then I was applying for all sorts of things, both communications roles and so on, what I'd been doing before, both in the railways and elsewhere. I applied for various things, had some interviews and things, but I sort of describe it as if you can imagine walking down this sort of office corridor full of doors that are all closed, and I'm trying all these doors in applying for jobs, and they're all firmly closed. As it turns out, apart from this one at the end, that was sort of ended up being in the ministry team.
So what was the door at the end? Because it wasn't a straightforward. It wasn't a straightforward apply for a job and get it, was it?
No. I mean, again, I think the Lord was using circumstances, because if we sort of fast forward, having left my rail employment, you'd arrived, James, and not long after that, to my great surprise, you asked me to be one of the church wardens, which I was happy to do. Again, slightly unexpected. And then in hindsight with that as well, because as I was wardening, James was and is keen to sort of enhance and develop the warden role from just sort of Mr. or Mrs. Maintenance, as it were.
Or just Mr. and Mrs. I'm not sure what to do, let's get the warden to do it.
And part of that for me eventually encompassed sort of leading services, leading prayer meetings. We used to have a midweek songs of praise thing, and the leading then sort of progressed into doing a bit of speaking, preaching. Tuesday mornings in particular I did. And then I suppose that was God using that circumstances to start the thinking process. And then about that same time, the church had advertised for an extra pair of hands, assistant minister. We weren't quite sure at that point what the job would be.
So it was the assistant minister. That was the sort of chief assistant to assistant chief, wasn't it? Really, it was kind of, but it was deliberately quite an open-ended role, because it was a role designed to have an extra pair of hands. There's various things that needed doing, but also a role that when we were planning it, because I think you were on the PCC as planning it, weren't you, as well?
Yes, probably was at the time.
We were thinking about a role that might enable someone to explore ministry.
Yes, with a possible view to ordination.
Or whatever.
And again, we weren't sure whether it would be a James Munro, relatively youngish out of university, or you know,
An old duffer like you.
Yeah, old duffer like me. Yeah.
Let's go there.
Yeah, so, and I remember the church advertised for the role, I think, at the beginning of the year, in 2019, and sort of January, February time, and we didn't get any applicants. And then the role was re-advertised again in the summer. And by that time, I'd been doing some stuff voluntarily with my warden's hat on, as I've just explained. So then I remember going to see you, James, that summer, and I remember I said, look, I'm not saying I've done a talk, I've led a meeting, I think I'm pretty much there. But then, very encouraging, the first thing that James H said to me was, I'm not surprised we're having this conversation. I thought, well, that's a good start. And so one thing led to another. From applying for the job, I was interviewed by James, and Jason Ward came in. Sat in.
I tell you what, I'm glad you can remember this stuff.
And it was a.
That's right. We got Jason, didn't we? Because it was you were an internal candidate, and because I knew you very well.
Yeah.
We felt that it would be useful to just have an outside.
Yeah, and
an outside person who would say, actually, I'm not sure this is a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah,
thankfully, Jason did.
No, thankfully not. No, I mean, it was a very, all correctly and rightly done, very thorough interview, and which was good. And so here we are, sort of, I think, about 6 years on now. I started in November 2019.
Yeah, not far away.
I don't think me starting and flooding, the first flood was connected though.
No, although it was connected in time, wasn't it? Not in terms of. I don't think you were responsible for it.
No.
You can see that all the staff changeovers. It was this wave of new staff and waves of water into Duffield. I think.
So that, in a nutshell, is how I got, as I put it, from being over there to over here. I really felt that God was using various circumstances, situations to get me to where he wanted me to be.
Okay, so you joined us, it'll be 6 years in this November.
Yeah.
As assistant minister. Is that the end of the story?
No, because we sort of discussed, and I remember after I'd been doing the job for, I don't know, maybe a year or just over, you and I went out for lunch.
Yeah.
And we sort of said, where next? And
that's always a dangerous, if you are ever taken out for lunch, Mike, just beware.
Very nice lunch, but
just be careful.
Well, at least you were gracious enough to let me finish my fish and chips before the serious conversation during the coffee afterwards, or tea for you.
Well, now I know. If you invite me out to the chippy, dear me.
So no, we had a very helpful and useful conversation, didn't we? And again, cutting a long story short, I said, well, look, having been doing the job, having seen what you do, James, as vicar, thinking about family, stage of life, and all the rest of it, for a number of reasons, it didn't feel right to go down the full ordination route, but I was, and of course still I'm very much enjoying what I'm doing, felt that it was playing to my strengths, and so really our conversation as well, the other approach is to go down the path of the lay minister, or licensed lay minister, or lay reader.
Explore the option.
Which we did, didn't we?
And I do remember that conversation, because I think it's quite interesting, isn't it, like discernment wise, the process of discernment isn't a process always of constantly saying, well, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do that, and move. Sometimes the process of discernment is, well, actually that is not for me.
Yeah.
I remember you saying to me, I've seen what you do, I don't want to do that. And I thought, well, fair enough.
Yeah, well,
I don't want to do it some days. So, that was quite helpful.
Yeah, the other reflection I've had is because, as we to use the very descriptive phrase, being somewhat of an old duffer by now, coming to something that bit later in life, I think you can be honest and you know yourself, you know your strengths and things, and you can sort of be realistic. And so, I just put my hand up and say, no, that wouldn't be my forte. But hopefully one can do a number of other things instead.
So that must have been sometime 2020.
Yeah.
So it must have been late 2020.
Yeah, probably.
Whereas we'd have been meeting on Zoom and eating lunch in other rooms.
Yes.
Or maybe did we go out? No, we didn't. You didn't take advantage of Rishi's. No, it wasn't one of Rishi's.
No.
Eat out, help out.
We went to that place in Milford when it was a pub.
That's right.
Is it still the Elephant and Peacock?
Eat out to help the values spread. Yeah. And then reader ministry then.
Yeah. So then. Fast forwarding again, after that conversation, we went down the route of applying for readers ministry, and that took 2 and a bit years, just over 2 years. It was quite full-on process.
That's the training, isn't it? It didn't
training.
take that long to apply.
No, sorry, no.
Don't worry, kids. If you are wanting to being a church, the application process isn't
No,
2.5 years.
the whole process, incling applying and getting on the course and everything, and getting endorsement from the PCC and all of that, which was very important. There was 2 quite full-on years of study with 7 or 8 modules, I think it was, from memory.
When did you start that? Was that 2022?
Yes, I think it was. Yeah. So 22 to 23, 23 to end of 23 I finished. No, end of 24 I finished and got a licence this year.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was 2 years and 7 or 8 modules. We looked at Old and New Testament, mission, pastoral care, leading worship. I can't remember them all, but
no, that's all right.
It was quite a wide-ranging thing, and
I remembered. Sorry, kids. The reason why it took a while to get to that is because you did MMTC
That's right.
for
yes.
just a year or 2 years.
I did it for a year,
That's right.
and then that ran into lockdown
That's
and
right.
everything.
Yeah,
So I'm afraid I had to draw stumps and bail out when we all went online. It was So yes, I did a year of MMTC, which then it was another stepping stone.
That's right.
Yeah.
What's that?
That's a good question, Adam. Well, you ought to know because we.
MMTC is the Midlands Ministry Training Course.
Yeah.
So it's a 1 day a week course that you can do over 1 or 2 years. That does 2 things, I think. You've done it, Adam. You've done a year of it.
Yeah.
So it does things like Bible overview and introduce to some doctrine stuff, and church leadership type stuff. And it does some preaching stuff. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. That was it.
Right, just is that a good? Is that? That's what they're telling me they're doing.
No, it was a good and helpful course, and it's obviously very biblically based and thing, and that's all good. So I did that, and then the reader training, and then we were licensed in the beginning of May this year.
Yes.
At the Cathedral.
Yeah.
And there was a rare photo, isn't there, of you, me, and our other reader, Mr. Lindop, in our robes.
Oh, well, probably could in a few years to come.
Probably the one and only time you'll see us all.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned a lot of different courses and this lead up to working in ministry full time. I wonder, how do you feel like your skill sets and your gifts that God's given you towards exploring ministry and helping in a church regularly, how do you think they've improved and developed through taking on this more formal full-time position?
That's a good question, Dave. Yeah, I think, I did in the midst whilst I was between jobs, I did this sort of online career coaching course, which, again, I've used the word hindsight a lot of times, but again, in hindsight, that was very helpful because it made you think out the box, do a skills audit, all the rest of it. And I kept coming back to, what am I most proficient at? What do I really enjoy doing? Was interacting with people, dealing with people. I've always been interested in people, so I'm describing myself as a people person, and writing. And so doing what I'm doing is really playing to my strengths because you're writing talks, you're writing leading notes, and you're dealing with people all the time.
Yeah.
And certainly, as I've done that, inevitably practice hopefully makes you more proficient, and each time you write a sermon or a talk, you hopefully getting a bit better at it, and James is very good with constructive feedback, as I'm sure we all testify. And then you meet more and more people, and we've been blessed with new folk coming into the church and stuff, and you get to learn their faith journey and where they're at and how you can help. And so it's like a snowball, rolls the snowball, and as you push the snowball along and make your snowman, it hopefully builds up over time. If that it's probably the wrong analogy for this time.
No, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it feels like things have progressed, and one hopes one is making a useful contribution somewhere along the way.
So just finally, are there any other questions that we agreed to ask you that we failed to ask you?
No, I think we've covered everything. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I hope that makes sense.
And so that is another part of an answer to a question that someone asked about our through to ministry, and we are halfway or 2/5, depending on your perspective, of the way through the answer to that question. So keep watching.
Yeah, we do get the questions, viewers, and we endeavour to answer them. Okay, so here we are approaching the end of this episode. I forget what number episode we're up to, but we're drawing towards the end of this one, and we'll come on to what we're doing next time shortly. But in the meanwhile, James Monroe, let me ask you about a typical day in the life of your role working for the church. Do you want to describe a particular day of the week for us and what that looks like for you, what it involves and so on?
Yeah, so I mean, doing youth work and youth ministry generally tends to mean that every day is a little bit different, rather than having a stock standard like, oh, you're doing sermons on a Sunday, so you'll probably prep that on a Saturday. My week tends to look a little bit more like, are you doing a bit of assemblies this day, a bit of long-term projecting here, maybe you're doing, a couple of whatever preparation you need to do for children's work on the Wednesday. So the day I thought I'd talk about is Monday, which I think is the day that has the most variety, while also being the one that I tend to be the most moving around for. So on a Monday morning, the first thing that I'll end up doing is, apart from going through my normal routine, obviously praying and devotional time, is I'll make my way off to William Gilbert, and or Meadows, in Duffield, and then I'll head to Little Eaton Primary after that. So this term we've been looking at, I thought quite ambitiously, James.
So this is assemblies.
These are assemblies that I'm doing. Now some people might go, is James not a little bit too complex? Or
it's the Bible book, James. Just to
No, I thought I'd just talk about Mr. Hughes here and just go a real raving time.
James.
Which some people might think is a little ambitious. I think it's been a really great opportunity to. I think so. Prior to that, I'd done a New Year, New Me. Let's talk about how the Bible, through the Sermon on the Mount, talks about better ways to live our lives, kind of thing. And then using James to then go, well, okay, but how does actually applying living God's way, what actually does that look like, and what are some of the pitfalls we might fall into? And especially during the summer term, which is a bit more wishy-washy in terms of consistency of how often you get to assemblies. I spend more time doing little drop-in sessions, so doing a bit of James here and there actually works quite nicely for adding into these different topics.
Because that's summer's like got SATs and bank holidays,
and
productions and leavers stuff, and trips away and all that gubbins.
Exactly. So normally when I get back, obviously the first things I'll do is then prep whatever I've got for next week. So normally I try and stay about a month ahead in terms of my assembly prep work, so I'll have sort of 3 or 4 or 5 in lieu. But once I've sort of gotten that next one done, I'll then start to look at, planning out my week. So normally that involves, do I need a children's slot? Is there a communion on? In which case, yes, children's slot isn't going to be on that week, but sometimes it will be. We've got one children's church, the Sparks at the moment in the morning happens, but during the afternoon we're doing Explorers, which has changed a lot about how that looks now. So we're now doing a little bit more on the fly, having the children sit at the back and then going in depth with them about the sermon. So they listen to the first bit of the sermon and then we go through the passage with them as it's being preached. This has been a great challenge, and in terms of preparation, can be a little ambitious. So I tend to make sure I've read the passage at least once before that Sunday, because otherwise it can be a little bit like dunking your head in the cold water right as you get there on a Sunday afternoon. When I'm not doing that, sometimes it'll look like preparation. So we've got the weekend away coming up very soon. So I've been spending a lot of time working on Pandemonium on Tour, which has been very fun, and I look forward to showing you what kind of wacky nonsense. Good. And outside of that, I've also been planning some games on the green, so that during the lunchtime activities and the slots between talks, we've got games that people can come and join in with that should be accessible for people of all age. We'll see whether that's the case or not. And then other than that, it tends to be smaller bits and bobs. So mainly just organising and going through emails on a Mondays also. And that Monday is normally the one where I've got the most
going on and different things.
Yeah, the most different things, because so much of it tends to be, as I'm sure you guys are also aware, you're spending most of it planning what you're doing for the rest of your week and going, okay, when am I going to fit in writing a sermon? When am I going to fit in doing X, Y, Z?
Good. Thank you. So that probably nicely segues into what are we doing for the next episode of the old podcast?
Well, we need to have a think. No. It's dunking. It's called dunking. So it's dunking related. So if you can be excited for the next 2 weeks, or 2 minutes, about what that is. We will come back and talk dunking next time.
May or may not involve biscuits.
Do I need to wear swimming trunks?
Well, you'll have to watch next
Couldn't
time.
possibly
viewers.
comment.
Right. Okay.
Obviously about donuts and holiness.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, you'll have to tune in next time to find
These
out.
are all good ideas. We've done our usual moving around of seats slightly. So Adam has taken his toilet roll and gone behind the screen. So if you do hear him,
That sounds really dodgy. he's gone behind his screen. He's up to.
It's low tech in the vestry.
I think we've practiced to stop that.